They can also sell those trees, especially during the dry season if they need some kind of income, and most importantly for fuel. Okay, and then biomass for their compost. They use the leaves and everything for their worms, and then keeping the topsoil intact. And then the live fencing, you know, a lot of these farms really do need fencing, especially one of the things that happens is all kinds of biodiversity comes back to these farms. They look like mini forests, you know, when they're really, I'll show you some pictures. And so all kinds of biodiversity starts coming back, so fences become really important. So they do these kinds of like really thorny, really thick plants along the edges to keep the micro-ecosystem intact. And again, with the biodiversity, I mean, I would walk along the road and there'd be, you know, monocrop fields, and then I'd like saunter onto like one of our wadis, and there'd be like parrots in the trees. Like parrots, you know, like from the zoo. You know, like in their wadis. It's really exciting. And then they can also use them for fuel. Another thing is fruit and medicinal trees. The most important part of this part is if they can't grow crops, right? So remember I said they were like intercropping. Eventually, in the dry season, after about 5 years, there's enough soil moisture for them to be able to grow crops. But if for some reason their crop fails, the trees are always producing fruit. So they take their fruit to market, and that's a really big deal, income generating activity, and they don't have to pay for that after a few years. Also for fuel, also for construction, biomass for compost, soil integrity, and micronutrients. Again, you know, about the rice. I'm like really excited when I see them eating all kinds of fruit. And then fodder. Fodder is a really big deal in these areas because in the dry season the animals end up really suffering because they don't have any fresh food. So they grow fodder on those trenches and bunds and all the like underutilized areas of their farms, and that saves them money. They also can sell the fodder to other farmers if they need an income, and it means that their animals are healthier, which then they can sell if they need the money during the dry season. That's hence the cash. And then their animals. Animals are a really big part of this system. The animals serve to weed the fields and plant the fields, and for all their transportation needs. They use this dung. This is DK trying to get me to touch the dung, which I wouldn't do. But they make these patties, and that's for fuel. And they also have these really cool biogas units that are getting popular in India right now. They use that for compost, and if they need to sell the animals again during the dry season, they have an income. Okay, so this is Sadananda's family before. I mean, you can see this is like the beginning of the wadi. So you see like the live hedge and the fodder trees around the edge, and then you have the sapota trees and the mango trees starting to grow in the middle. But this is like the dry. I mean, I don't know if you guys can you imagine trying to plant something there? It's like impossible, right? So this is a couple years in. And if you can tell, even it's still the dry season, but there's still like some action happening in between the trees. And then this is the wadi today. So, and at this point, this is Sadananda's farm, and I think he's not even growing crops anymore for food. I think he's only growing fodder for his animals, and then he's doing timber and fruit trees, and then he does vermicompost, and he sells the compost, and he sells the fodder, and he sells the milk from his cows, and like, so he's not even growing directly for his family anymore. He's able to really make a business out of his land. And again, this is 1 acre. These are like, if you have land in India incredible for them to be able to produce and make an income during the drought. Okay, this are the 2,500 families in the 4 districts. This, so these are the different villages. So Kampisofa, if you see from agriculture, they were making about 1,000 rupees a year, and then that pretty much doubled after their wadi. It's about 5 years in when they really start to have a flourishing wadi, and you can see the results from like every single village. It's just like outstanding. Okay, so I wanted to tell you a little anecdote about Basangoda. This is Basangoda here, and his son. So when about 10 years ago, he was one of the villagers who was in the Transfer of Technologies project, and his daughter was dying of TB at the time. She was less than a year old, and I like worked with her last year, and then I found out afterwards that she was dying of TB when she was little. And he joined the self-help group, and they got loans to start his wadi and start planting. And it's like one of those like incredible success stories, because I like had a relationship with his daughter who's now 15, or she's like 12, but she's like super healthy, super smart, and like it just wasn't going that way, right, before this intervention. The other funny thing, which we can talk about, but he's now digging his own well on his land. So it's a little, and this is like one of those problems that we can talk about, but it's a little bit like after they get out of the emergency stage of like malnutrition and illiteracy and that whole scene, then there's some kind of like management that needs to happen, right? Because then they're like, oh, I have money, irrigation, and they start digging wells, and then there's no regulation. You know, so it's a new set of problems after you get them out of the emergency stage. But anyway, okay, so what I say, why this was successful, right? One is it was a long-term commitment, right? The NGO came in for 5 to 10 years. They worked like, for a year, they told me they built their credibility with the villagers for a year. Because if you think about it, like some Who's-he-was comes in and is like, hey, you want to like put some trees on your land? And, you know, why would you trust them? I spent a lot of time with the farmers trying to figure out, why did you trust these guys, right? But mostly what they said, why they trusted them was because they stuck around for like a year. And were like, listen, this is really going to work, I'm telling you. So there was that, then there was the self-help groups that were established, so they had their own micro-lending, own like community action groups. The second is the farming technology, so it has to be location specific. So you wouldn't grow bananas in this area because bananas require too much irrigation. They have like mangoes, sapota, tamarind, like that. So that really, you really have to like, what's that called? Maybe like, anyway, it's got to be site specific. You got to make it specific to the environment. It's got to have a low input cost. It's got to be flexible depending on the environmental conditions. The third is like, this is my most important one. It's like farmer by farmer.